Welcome to Attwood Unleashed 71. First guest of the evening, Billy Hayes, couldn't make it. So we're now bringing in one of our most requested guests ever, resplendent as usual in orange, Matthew Steeples.
I'm
Steeples
wearing.
is... You wearing, Matthew?
I'm wearing the orange jumper, especially for you. I've incurred all the locals asking me why I was wearing an orange jumper on a hot day like this, but especially for your audience, here I am.
I'm looking at the thermometer on my fan right now and it is 29 degrees. It's getting this hot. This is the last of it, I think, before it's going to cool down because it was up to 40 degrees recently. So Matthew in his orange jumper is doing absolutely great because he must be a bit sweaty there. So if you're not
Well, we've got
familiar,
a bit of a sea breeze here, so that does help.
with Matthew, then tell them a bit about the Steeples Times.
Well, I'm the publisher of an online daily title called the Steeple Times that we set up in 2012. We write about many different things, but true crime is one of them. We do things like horse racing as well, oligarchs, society, all sorts of different things, food and drink. But our most popular topics are somebody we can't talk about, and a lady called Meghan, formerly known as Meghan Markle. I think that's if we write about her, we get more traffic than anything else.
What subjects with Meghan Markle have become of the most interest to your subscribers?
Well, our most popular ever article is one asking about her PR person, who I call her PR peddler. As he claims to be a journalist, called a man called Omid Scooby, who used to work for Heat magazine and used to hang out with Jodie Marsh. I don't know if you remember her, but a glamour model, and he's now morphed into a mouthpiece for the Duchess of Sussex, and he wrote a book called Finding Freedom. We published an article saying who really is Omid Scooby, and he's somebody who's not quite who he seems. He's not quite the genuine journalist. His article today is simply attacking Tom Bauer for his book on Meghan Markle, saying that Meghan's new podcast is the best thing ever. He just does as he's told, really, and our readers wanted to find out who he really was, to be honest.
So, if anyone's got a question for Matthew, please put it in the chat. We've got one from Joanna. Can Matthew speak about Yankee Wally?
Well, Yankee Wally is somebody who came to my attention through a journalist who you actually met at my house from the Daily Mail in January. She was very interested in her. This lady set up a YouTube channel to talk about her thoughts on Meghan. And this was a Welsh lady who I didn't know what her real name was until later and her past. And she's become one of our biggest supporters. And she gives her opinions on a daily basis, rather like you were. She was cancelled on various channels because there are many people working with the Duchess of Sussex to get rid of anybody who dares criticize this lady or dares question her stories. There's not only her own family who she's trying to cancel, there are a lot of other people who upset her and they don't have any right to speak in her view. And Yankee Wally is a lady, an elder lady in Wales. She ran her own business. She has a daughter. She became interested in this topic and she gave nightly discussions and read out the articles from newspapers. And she does so in a kind of witty Welsh way. And she makes sort of jokes about her own life. And she's become quite an endearing sort of figure in mine. And sadly, a lot of people have witnessed her being cancelled. So we came to join many who supported her.
Sounds like someone we need to get on the podcast, but perhaps in the Patreon section because it's unpalatable for the YouTube algorithm.
I would definitely say that. That's the issue with her, is if she's been given radio shows, she's done many different things, but they don't seem to generally last. Her YouTube channel had a huge following, but it disappeared because there is a man called Christopher Boozy. I don't know if you've encountered him, but he runs a thing called Bot Sentinel, and he ran a campaign against her with the help of Omid Scooby, and the police were involved and all sorts of different matters. But, this is how personal it gets, the situation of this story. It's not just about the war of the royal family. Tom Bower's book was the War of the Windsors, but there's a whole nother level of war on the people who are called the Sussex squaddies, who are the supporters of Meghan, and then the many, many hundreds of thousands who criticize her. And I receive messages from both sides of them, but obviously the ones that seem to like me are obviously the ones that aren't her fans. But I simply ask questions about her behavior. She chose to marry into a royal family, but she thought she could have the rights and privileges, but she didn't want the responsibilities. And I think that's the main issue that people who have a problem with the Duchess of Sussex have with her and her husband, because they want all the security detail, they want everything else, but they don't want to do any of the work. Now, Prince William and his wife, they do what they do, and whether you like them or not, they do seem to be showing willing to participate. Whereas these two, they just moan and groan and complain, and then they want a private life, but then they want to get 100 million, which I don't believe in that number, by the way. I think the numbers are greatly exaggerated, but they want all this money from Spotify and Netflix, but they shot it, but they want a private life. So make up your mind time, I say, of both of them.
Right, I'm going to read the next question that's on the screen, but I'm going to abbreviate the last word so we don't attract algorithmic problems. Can Matthew speak about the FMs? So the FMs, the palm ticklers, we've got 3 podcasts imminent about the FMs that I think people are going to really enjoy. We have a woman coming on who her dad did some evil things. I'll leave that to your imagination. And he was connected, I believe, to a judge and cops in the West Yorkshire FM police, the same police that protected Savile. We've got a prison guard coming on who was run out of the prison and attacked by FMs and ended up losing his job because of the FMs. And we have got Holly, the prison governor, in part 2. She is going to disclose the role of the FMs in the prison service and the guards union and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of FM content coming your way, viewers, in the next month or so. Now, from the cops and the guards we've interviewed, it does seem like those professions are particularly permeated by the FMs. Do you have any perspective on the FMs?
Well,
Matthew?
I won't say anything that prejudices your channel, but there are groups of people in society who stick together and do things for one another. Now, the FMs, I don't know a huge amount about. I know people who have been involved in it. My own grandfather was briefly one of them, but he didn't like it, so he left. But I would say, look.
Tell us more. Tell us more about that. What did you learn from that?
Well, my grandfather died many, many years ago, but he said that he didn't like the way that they behaved, and he didn't want to talk about it. That was all I ever got from him about that subject. But he was part of a community in Manchester, and he, in the workplace in the 1950s and 60s, people did join those things because if you were, a certain level of management, you were expected to join whatever you were told to join. And I think, it was very much like going to the golf club. You met certain people, and if you did someone a favor, they did you a favor. I think that's partly what it's about. And the other thing that they do that they laud is their charity work. And I don't know why I'm on it, but I'm on a mailing list from them, which I get, their press releases about things they do at their hall in central London, their very big place in Covent Garden, and it's all about their events. I've never been to any of them, but they're very keen to try and make themselves out to be part of the community now, and they probably do some good. But rather like Jimmy Savile with his Friday lunch club. Once you have people coming to your orbit and you have something you want to hide, if you've got them in your orbit, you will be able to manipulate them into doing what you want. And there must be a bit of that going on with them, I do believe.
Ash
But
has
I
asked
can't say I have personal experience of them. I know people who are members of it. I have been invited to join such things, but I have always said it's not my thing. I'm any club that would have me, I wouldn't want to join, I think is the way I feel about it. I was a member of the Carlton Club, which was the premier conservative club of Great Britain for a while, and I didn't really feel aligned to it, so I left. That's the only club I've ever joined of that type, and it wasn't for me. I'm very much a loose cannon in my regard, and I like to do my own things. So I'm not really the kind of person that would join such a thing, and I don't think you are either, Shaun.
Definitely not a person who would join, even though there are many conspiracy theories that I am already in it. Ash has asked if you could turn off whatever's beeping in your room. Is it your
Whatever is
phone
beeping? It could be my computer.
Let's mute
email
that.
program. I'll quit it.
And a huge thank you to everyone who's sending in questions. We're going to continue. We're going to go over to McCann and the McCanns shortly, but I need to probe Matthew a little bit more about what he's just said, I think, because what's the Carlton Club?
The Carlton Club is a club in St. James's, a gentleman's club that was originally became part of the Conservative Party. It was bombed by the IRA. It's a place where every prime minister, every Conservative leader was automatically made a member. Margaret Thatcher was the first female member of the club because they had to have her because she was a leader of the party. And it's a place where you can go and you can get a cheap drink, cheap food. You get cheap accommodation if you're staying there. It's a beautiful building, but it's now really not that closely linked to the Conservative Party since David Cameron because he didn't like its ethos. And it's become more of a conference centre now, but I haven't been a member of it for many, many years.
What didn't he like about its ethos?
Well, it wasn't the actual Carlton Club's ethos. It was more the way that the fact that I feel the Conservative Party left me. I didn't leave the Conservative Party. I didn't like the Conservative Party as from the moment that Ian Duncan Smith became leader, and I've not supported it ever since then. So I couldn't be a member. I couldn't be a member of the Carlton Club because you have to declare that you're a supporter of the Conservative Party.
So are you saying that London is strewn across London are all kinds of fraternities, houses, clubs, FMs, entities?
Yes, there are different clubs for different organisations. So the Garrick Club, for example, where Boris Johnson held his famous meeting with the owner of the editor, then editor of the Telegraph, which helped him along during some of his troubles. That's primarily judges and actors. To be a member of the Travellers Club, which Terry Waite, for example, that's where I met him. You've got to come from the world of travel and exploration and, things like that. There are all sorts of the RAC clubs about motoring. There's lots of different types of clubs and you pay an annual membership fee and, you meet people there and it is a good place to be introduced to people. And the great benefit is when you travel, you get reciprocal arrangements in other cities and you get cheap accommodation and you get to stay in amazing buildings and you do meet some characters. I have to say such places can be very useful, but equally they're very incestuous. It's not like Jimmy Savile's police club because he was using that to protect himself on a personal level. That was a very much different kind of club.
So to be invited into one of these clubs then, do you have to be from a certain section of society? For example, I'm from Witness.
To be invited into one of these clubs or even one of the clubs, for example, where Meghan Markle, got in her intro into London, Soho House, all of these clubs require that you are introduced. So you have to be brought in by someone who's an existing member and supported by other existing members. So to join the Carlton Club, you have to have a proposer and a seconder. So you have to know at least 2 people. And then they have a book, and you're put in a book, and people can sign in the book for you and support you, or they can put a mark against you and try and stop you. So, yes, you do have to have an inroad.
So people get blacklisted from these places as well.
They can be, and then normally what happens in those places, if the person you've proposed is put on a blacklist, you have to resign yourself because you've introduced somebody bad. So it is a hierarchy. It's a very curious system, but I think it's a lot more relaxed than it was. But then you've got all these modern clubs, like, for example, Soho House, which is full of media people and, musicians and artists. And, they have a hierarchy more based on money. It's if you're very rich, you get in. There are many different levels of these clubs. So, for example, in Chelsea in London, there's the Chelsea Arts Club. To be a member of that, you have to be an author or a painter or a poet. Madonna tried to join there and thought she could buy her way in. The membership were having none of it. She wasn't welcomed. I have a friend who had a shop in Chelsea. It was called Voyage, and to get in the door, you had to be approved, basically. And they didn't like Naomi Campbell, so they banned her. And I quite commend them for that. And there are different ways and people do things, but no, these members clubs are very quirky, and they're each very different, and there are more kind of underground ones that are equally the same. So it doesn't have to be a high level of society. There's the highs and the lows, and the weird and the wonderful, and you can find clubs for anything, any number of things. There are groups of scientists who meet, and there are groups of whatever. In America, you've got the Bilderberg Club of all these wealthy people, and you've got all these people who meet in the forest and have these conventions about the environment. And then you've got, for example, this Burning Man thing that's coming up. To get into that, you have to pay a fortune, and you're not guaranteed to get in. Look at the thing on Netflix, this Firefly Festival. It was a game which was a complete con, but all of these things are groups of people who come together for a reason, and they generally come together for a reason because they think they can benefit somehow from it.
So, A Nexus has put Soho House is a third-tier nouveau-riche royals and aristocrats.
Well, I would say it's more media. I would say it's more media than anything else. It's the media classes rather than the. It is very. You could say nouveau. Yes, there's plenty of people. It's there are places like Annabelle's in Mayfair, which used to be a nightclub, and now it's been bought by a man called Richard Caring, who owns most of the restaurants to the Ivy Group and Le Caprice, and which is closed down, but Daphne's, and he owns this group of clubs. And to get in, you have to be proposed and seconded. But there's a lot of Russian money and Chinese. You get in based on how rich you are, basically.
What about, is it the Gonzo or the Groucho or
the Groucho Club is more more to do with theatre. So people like Stephen Burkoff, the actor who I know very well, and but again, that's more into being a bit more like Soho House, because money talks now. Those places have sold out because they are generally owned by a private individual or a company. So ultimately, they have to be commercially viable as well. And to be commercially viable, you've got to have people coming who spend money. So, for example, in Mayfair, there was another place called the Arts Club, and that was in Dover Street, and it was a club for artists. And they could go there and they could have a sandwich. They had a very weird Danish restaurant. I don't know why the restaurant was Danish, but you go there and have a sort of pickled herring or whatever you wanted, and it was very, very cheap. A sandwich was about £3 or £4, which in a members club in London, and a glass of wine was probably £3 or something. And then it didn't do very well because all the old members were dying. So they sold to some very rich Indian people. And of course, the patron was Prince Philip. And he came to reopen it for these people, who turned it into a very smart, shishi club. And it was Prince Philip and Gwyneth Paltrow who came to reopen it. But Prince Philip was actually reopening a commercial venture. And I asked a lot of questions about this at the time because the royals are not meant to endorse commercial ventures. And, it was very, very sad because all these old members were told you can come back, but they couldn't afford to pay £25 for their sandwich. And that was the end of them. And now it's a very trendy place where the likes of Meghan Markle, for example, go. Well, she doesn't anymore now. She's in America, but that's where the kind of place she went before she got married. So, it's sad how those places have driven out the real characters. The Chelsea Arts Club still has that. It is a real mix of eccentrics.
So you mentioned earlier, and we know the FMs are patriarchal. You mentioned some of that earlier, gentlemen's clubs, but now you're saying about Meghan Markle and stuff. Are they mostly men's only institutions? These places?
The likes of Soho House, no. These commercial ventures are very much aimed at younger people. There's none of that hierarchy. That hierarchy is gone. The likes of the Carlton Club now has female members. There probably are a couple of clubs that don't have female members left. But the affiliation of the Carlton Club is political. And the Garrick Club, I think, has rules about which rooms men and women are allowed in. And there are clubs there's one called White's, which is very aristocratic. And that's still got women are only allowed in certain rooms on certain days still. So, yes, There is still discrimination in these places.
So we had a question up earlier that's gone off the screen, but I think the lady wanted your general thoughts on the McCann case and how long all this money is going to keep getting spent on this case.
Well, the McCann case is getting, again, more and more interesting because every day that goes by that they don't charge the German suspect, Christian Bruckner, is evidence that they haven't got anything on Christian Bruckner, in my view. And Mark Williams Thomas he went to Portugal and he corresponded with Christian Bruckner with a view to saying that he was the guilty party, but even he found that it didn't stack up. They're keeping him going as a distraction from looking at the real issue, which is why have they given £14 million to fund a search for somebody who simply won't be found? Because if she were going to be found, somebody would have traded in somebody by now, given all these rewards that were offered. And we're not talking £10,000 rewards like we get for some of the people we've talked about. So, for example, the reward with Stuart Lubbock, who, we interviewed the lady who was his one-time wife, and, that's a £40,000, £50,000 reward, and nothing's been done there. Now, the McCann case, we're talking rewards that are in the millions. Now, if you knew somebody who had taken that child, you would trade them in. It's a bit like the case that we've got at the moment in Liverpool with the poor child that was shot. The underworld, somebody will trade that person in because it's so high profile. No one's going to allow that to be forgotten. The McCann case is very, very strange, and there are too many people who associated themselves with it. So you've got prime ministers ranging from Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Theresa May. They've all supported the McCanns. Theresa May gave a party in Downing Street for the McCanns. If the McCanns were ever to be found guilty of anything, I'm not saying they will be, is that these people will end up looking very stupid. Likes of Philip Green, the likes of Richard Branson, they all offered very big rewards to help them. And all of these people have put a lot of effort into supporting them. And, the McCanns did associate with some strange people in the days after their child went missing. For example, Clement Freud, and they went and had their vodka and risotto with him. And, he was alleged to be a paedophile. Many people say he was. And, he's dead now, so we can't prove that one way or the other, but the allegations are there. And, the McCanns have had